Welcome to What is Going Om, for new thought from the edge of Om. Each week on Om Times flagship radio show, veteran broadcaster, author, and media consultant Sandie Sedgbeer conducts thought-provoking interviews with inspirational authors, artists, musicians, scientists, speakers, and filmmakers who are working at the point where spirituality and science meet consciousness at the very edge of Om. Here is your host, Sandie Sedgbeer.
Hello. It's been said that the reality we have is the result of the consciousness we hold. As we observe our current reality with war, famine, genocide, and geological and geopolitical upheaval ruling the headlines, and who knows what else that's being kept out of them, it's clear that if we do not change our consciousness, this planet and we will not survive. But how do we do that in numbers large enough to make a difference? What does it require of us? Where and how do we begin creating a new world and a new consciousness? And how different will our lives and our children's lives be? Penny Kelly is a publisher, teacher, researcher of consciousness, naturopathic physician who left her career in engineering after experiencing a full spontaneous awakening of Kundalini to study the brain, consciousness, intelligence, intuition, and cognition. The author of 15 books, including Robes, a book of coming changes, Planet Earth, Her People, History, and Current Dilemma, and 4 volumes on consciousness and energy, Penny Kelly joins me now to discuss her latest and arguably most consciousness-stretching book, The Revival, A Path to a New Earth, New Human. Penny Kelly, welcome.
It's good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Penny, in your intro to The Revival, you say that we can no longer look at change as if we're innocent bystanders caught in the storm. We have each had input into the paradigm we see all around us. And The Revival is your attempt to help us see the world through bigger eyes. What is it that we are not seeing?
Well, I think it would have to be what are the many things we are not seeing. And I think the biggest thing is that we're not seeing our own power. We aren't seeing that consciousness is the determiner of everything. And we don't look at our actions as if they matter. So that indicates that we don't matter. And I could go on, but those are probably the top 3. So.
Well, you've said that to gain wider, deeper, more cohesive understanding of our world and our place in it, we need to watch what is happening in real time in everyday living, grasp the hidden drivers behind those events, and assess the short and long-term outcomes. Tell us a little bit about what you see is going on right now.
Oh, I think in a nutshell, we're experiencing some really necessary changes. Everybody has withdrawn. Everybody has pulled out. I don't know if they're just completely distracted. I don't know if they're if it's too much for them. There's so much that needs to be changed that you could almost say there's no way that the system we have will survive. We have a civilization. It has multiple aspects and cultures within it. And those stem from the kind of consciousness that arises in that location, geographic location, that affects consciousness deeply. And we have people everywhere who are completely distracted, willfully allowing themselves to be distracted. And the result is that while we're playing with our toys, there are people who are very power hungry, who are very destructive, who are making a mess out of everything.
Yeah.
So we stopped participating about 100 years ago. We have to begin to participate again.
Yes, and that is, that's the hard one, isn't it? Because yes. I think many people don't even realize that they are not participating.
That's
and,
right.
This whole withdrawal thing, I think with the pandemic, it set people up to withdraw. And people have reached fatigue in everything, fatigue around, the upheavals, fatigue around war, fatigue around pandemics, everything.
That's true. However, when you get people talking about something new, something interesting, something different, they get energized. It's amazing. It's amazing to watch it. And what I see when I look at that fatigue, that general apathy that's out there, it's for the old system. And what happens in any system, doesn't matter where or what time period it's in, after you put it all together and it's working, it's like anything that settles. Some factors rise to the top, and what has risen to the top are all the things that don't work. And so what we're seeing is the legacy of all the things that don't work, and we could correct those, but nobody's doing that.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're seeing is a system. Most people with that fatigue factor that you're talking about, they're like, I'd rather build something new. I'd rather go in some new direction than try to fix the old. And it's the same thinking. Is it easier, cheaper, more efficient to buy a house and gut it and fix it up, or just build a new one?
Yeah. And many people want a new paradigm, but they just don't know what they need to do to allow this to happen. Your book lays this out very, very well. You talk about every paradigm having at least a dozen or so areas of interest and function, and the main sectors of a civilization, such as government, finance, science, technology, business, education, medicine, etc. And it offers an overview of each sector, its legacy, how it's affected by changes in other sectors, and what the future looks like in each one. I want to take a couple of those. We can't get into all of them, but I think the most important ones. Let's start with education, because this is critical. We have seen what's happened to education and to our children on many, many levels, including, as you point out, the nutrition. So tell us about that. Tell us about what's happening, what the legacy is, and what the future looks like.
I have to say that this is my favorite one. Education. I was an educational consultant for 18 years, working with schools, corporations, etc. And I left because nobody understood. Here's a classic example. I'm talking about the brain and brain compatible learning and childhood development from a whole different angle. And people would say, what does the brain got to do with education? And I would be like, oh my God. It has everything to do with education. And so there's so much that we need to understand. And I think the basic thing, the most basic and most useful thing is understanding, how do we work? How does the brain work? How does perception work? What is consciousness? What is cognition? What happens in the body when you really grasp something new? There are changes in your DNA. It's not as steady as people think it is. And so that, we could just start with that. And then education, it puts the body as the main channel for learning. And education as we have it today is you get in your classroom, you sit down, you shut up, you don't speak unless spoken to, you have to ask permission to speak. What is the legacy of that? It's that people are taught that they belong in little boxes. They should not speak unless they're spoken to, and they have to have permission to speak. And so why is it so successful today that we're seeing censorship all over? Because the people have signaled their willingness to be censored back in grade school. And the parents have allowed that. So the other legacies, especially copying, is one of the ones that's at the top of my list. We learn by copying. We're like little monkeys. And that's the best and the fastest and the most efficient way to learn. So when you get into school, what do they forbid? copying. So what happens? What's the result of that? We learn to not see what's right in front of us because we don't want to copy what somebody else might have said or done or built or created, etc. And so we end up not cooperating. We end up having to go off and do something totally, I'm going to say sometimes useless. Sometimes it's brilliant, but the cooperation that's necessary to evolve as a civilization isn't there.
No.
And that comes from that, that legacy of thou shalt not copy.
And teachers themselves are saying, I don't want to be a teacher anymore because
I know.
the reason I became a teacher, I'm not allowed to do that.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. In the classroom, the research at the time that I left educational consulting, the research was showing that approximately 11 minutes out of each hour was spent in actually teaching. And the rest of that hour was spent in directing and guiding and, disciplining and moving. Okay, sit, stand, walk, do this, do that, whatever.
Yeah.
So it was really discouraging. The materials that we use. One of the things they have done, and really very effectively, is to make sure that every generation has a new way of doing everything, so that the parents can't help, and that leaves the child floundering. And the school doesn't care. The
No.
school doesn't care.
No.
And so the result, the legacy of that is that you have this break in the ability to be able to carry concepts and practices, successful practices, from one generation to the next. And the result of that is that people end up saying, you just don't get it. And they do get it, but they get it differently. They get it from another way. But it's very effective in terms of breaking down our ability to come together, figure things out together, and move ahead using common concepts and different approaches.
So what would the future look like if we could begin to change this?
I think the future in terms of education, I'll just say that I don't see schools at all in their current format. There's too many financial interferences coming, and schools are not supported, and they already are really too dangerous. Most people won't send their children to school, and all of that is within the next 5 to 10 years. And so we're coming into a point or a period of time where homeschooling is going to be very, very big. It already is. It's growing leaps and bounds. And teachers will become contract teachers. They will come in and they will teach for 6 weeks or something to a group that has hired that teacher to teach that subject that the teacher loves. That's another thing. Teachers can't teach what they love.
No, that's right.
And I see these. There's a series of transitions. Okay, these aren't all like forever kinds of things that I see, but there's like a setup of learning centers, community learning centers that operate for people from cradle to grave. Excuse me, and they kids come in and they have projects. Adults come in, they have projects. They get to work with kids sometimes. Kids get to work with old folks. That's really valuable, really valuable.
Yes.
And and the result is that kids get hands-on education. A lot of education takes place outdoors. In fact, in the future, when I've gone ahead, let's say 2050 to 2080, the primary education is survival. How do we survive? And that gets taught to children first. That's primary. And then things like reading, writing, arithmetic, science, technology, languages, geography, all that stuff gets added on. But the need to survive is much greater. And so that becomes the core, the base core. Once you know how to survive, then you may end up even traveling to other places where you'll stay for a few weeks. This is after travel becomes okay again. And you learn how to survive in that environment because different geographies require different approaches to survival.
What about consciousness? Do you see a time when we will? I mean, kids want to know who they are, but they're
Oh,
not given an opportunity. They're told
I
who
know.
they are.
I
Do you
know.
see consciousness becoming part of, a new kind of curriculum?
Yeah, actually, the curriculum becomes brain compatible and themed, and that is critical. The brain compatible means that the whole person begins to be developed. In fact, I'm now in the process of creating a school for parents who want to school their children at home, and that it's brain compatible themed educational materials. And I think that that's really the best way for us to go forward without without like wallowing in this anger that, oh, I didn't learn anything. Well, you're never too old to learn. You can go back to school. I'm 75 and I'm back in school. I'm taking math. So there's a whole bunch of things that that come up in terms of consciousness. What are the cycles of consciousness? When should new information be presented so that it's compatible with that cycle of consciousness? Another thing is, what about the effect that various levels of consciousness have? There's alpha, beta, theta, delta, high beta, gamma, and beyond. Those are all different states of consciousness. Each state allows for different response to information. There's the whole telepathy, kinesthetic or kinesthesia. There's a whole telekinesis thing that we should be teaching. I think we will be teaching that. I mean, I'm already teaching that. I've been teaching those things for 40 years, but they're to adults. And the adults have, until recently, they haven't felt like they could talk about that in public. So there are children that do that naturally. Why aren't we nurturing that?
Yeah, yeah.
That allows people to know who they are and what they can do.
Absolutely. Yeah. Let's move on to medicine, because that's another system that seems to be falling apart. I mean, in England, it's, we're in dire straits. When I come to America and I hear America too is in dire straits, I'm quite shocked,
Yeah.
because it's a completely different model that you have here. But, what is the legacy there?
The biggest legacy is that we stopped taking care of ourselves. We stopped understanding how to take care of ourselves. And that has resulted in degeneration across the board. And for the last 100 years, each generation has degenerated a little bit further. And that degeneration has been very, very expensive. Hang on, there's something I wanted to well, let me not get off track. So there's this whole sense of what I'm going to call like science will fix it. And so when we heard follow the science, well, that was right down people's alley. I don't have to do anything different. Just give me the pill. And that's not workable. So we do not understand that we are frequency beings, and frequency creates plasma, and plasma responds directly to consciousness. Why are we using our consciousness to help with our own healing, to maintain ourselves, to keep ourselves youthful until we step out of here? There's no reason for us to be falling apart. And we're falling apart at earlier and earlier ages.
Yes, we are. We were supposed to live longer, stay healthier. One thing I want to bring up is the Journal of the American Medical Association said that as many as 50% of the scientific articles in their journal have faked or made up data.
Yeah.
Why are they publishing this material then? Because we can't rely on it.
No, you really can't. And I was aware of that when I was working in the lab with Dr. Levengood for 15 years. We had a different focus. We were studying plasma and consciousness and crop circles and all kinds of things that were outside the mainstream of things. And he could not get published, which is why I wrote that book about our work. And it was very clear that JAMA, that's the Journal of American, Medical Association, that was bought and paid for. And they were being convinced with a few, green things in their hand that they should publish something that had no basis to it. And we had articles, I published a few articles with Dr. Levengood, and what we ran into was that it would be peer-reviewed science, and no other scientists would touch it. They would not review it. They said, no, sorry, can't do that. Don't want to touch that. Don't want to have any chance of losing my funding.
There you go.
So that's how it works.
Yeah. There's one piece of that sector, that segment of the book, that chapter that I want to bring up. Okay. And that is the question that you raise of whether what we're have been dealing with the pandemic is not a coronavirus at all, but a mycoplasma. Yeah. Tell me about that. What evidence do you have for that?
Oh my. Okay, so back in the 70s and 80s, I think it was the end of the 70s, this whole AIDS thing came out. And there were articles that came out. They were scientific, peer-reviewed articles. And people who were honorable, who were writing and saying, certain things. And I kept this one article that actually was a nice compilation of a whole bunch of other things. And it was from Nexus magazine. I forget the year exactly, but I think that article really laid it out. And they said that scientists, excuse me, scientists had been discovering that they had been working since 1942 through 1947 to create this sort of a bioweapon. And they had discovered how to use a mycoplasma. A mycoplasma has no cell walls. Therefore, it cannot be detected in any kind of ordinary medical test. The only way it can be detected is through a PCR test. And a PCR test works. You get the sample of whatever it is, and you end up running these. You run these tests, and you just keep running them. And each time you run the PCR test, it builds another little piece of whatever the DNA snippet that it's after came from. It ends up rebuilding that DNA snippet and shows you where it came from. Okay, so the PCR test, Dr. Carrie Mullis said, no, it isn't for diagnosing. It is for detecting what DNA has been detected in the body and what is it that it's actually doing. Where did it come from? So you get a clue as to how to move forward. And I actually have a couple things I'd like to just read off. Mycoplasma is a retrovirus.
4 minutes before break. So
okay, this will only take a minute. Mycoplasma is a retrovirus. It's capable of copying DNA. It's undetectable in ordinary blood and tissue tests. It's parasitic. Ivermectin fixes parasites. Okay, they can be treated. Mycoplasmas can be treated with tetracyclines and quinolones. That's tetracycline is azithromycin, and quinolones is hydroxychloroquine. A visnovirus. The mycoplasmas in these things were married to a visnovirus. A visnovirus does not show up for 20 or 30 years, and only if there is a big stress. So the question I had was the vaccine just to create enough stress to bring that mycoplasma into action? Different dosages produce different things. If you have a mycoplasma at 10 to the 10th, you get AIDS. If it's at 10 to the ninth, you get some kind of muscular problem like, what is that thing where you can't walk?
Parkinson's?
Well, that's another one.
Yeah.
Okay, and chronic fatigue syndrome, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a whole theory now that is beginning to come together as I'm working with it. I don't hear this from anybody else, but I've thought, well, I probably can't get this published anywhere, but I'm still putting it together. So we have this ignorance of the human body. We don't have any real food anymore. We aren't getting the nutrition. The result is that everything is going down. Bones, the body continues to try to build itself every day, has to rebuild. The eyes are going bad. The ears are going bad. The nervous system is going bad. The bones are going bad. Joint systems, joint capsules are breaking down. Are we going to get the message? We need real nutrition, and you can't get that from fake foods. So that's another legacy that's actually in the medical and in the agricultural legacy. So, and what happens to consciousness when you don't have the right nutrition? Then you can't use it very well. Yeah. You don't think well. You don't perceive everything that's there to perceive. And all you can feel is, I hurt.
Yeah. You say that a major part of the medicine of the future will be what we don't do as much as what we do.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, actually, I think I see it's taken 20 years since I wrote Getting Well Naturally, and maybe 25 years. And just now, finally, I'm beginning to see people going, oh, maybe we need real food. It's like, yeah. Duh. So, and that brings me great joy. It's like, okay, yeah, we do. We definitely do. So that, we stop eating all the sugar. And we start eating real food. We start moving again, exercising. You have to exercise because it generates electricity. And that electricity is used to drive the transactions in the body. So it's, what I see is we're using frequencies instead of drugs. A lot of stuff, probably 90 to 95% of what people are dealing with has to do with poor nutrition, lack of exercise, and lack of understanding of how to take care of a body. So when you start, I think we're coming to a point in time where we'll be able to get all of our nutrition in one teaspoon of some kind of paste. And then we can eat other things if we want. But frequency, if there's something, that happens, an infection, a virus, whatever, that's all done with frequency in the future.
Vindication for royal life.
There you go. Yeah.
There you go.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Well, we're going to take a short break now. You're listening to What is Going On. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, and my guest today is publisher, teacher, researcher of consciousness, naturopathic physician, and author Penny Kelly. And we're talking about her latest book, The Revival, Path to a New Earth, New Human. We'll be back in a few moments with more from Penny Kelly. And the first thing we'll be talking about is consciousness, of course, because that's the theme throughout all of this, but also something that's very dear to all of us, and that is finance. Stay tuned.
Om Times TV. Imagine becoming a super influencer. Reinvent yourself, invest in your brand, and then manifest your success with a robust spheric approach. Om Times Media and Broadcasting offers a unique and multifaceted way to become the spiritual and conscious influencer you deserve to be by putting your message across our powerful platform with its proven record of integrity and excellence. Through our produced shows, Om Times offers the opportunity to become a social media TV personality, a radio show host, an Om Times magazine columnist, and a syndicated podcaster, all in one shot. By live streaming your show on Om Times TV and broadcasting it across the extensive Om Times radio and TV networks, you become more than a host. You become an ambassador and a force for positive change. Om Times. Open yourself to the possibilities.
Hello, I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, host of Times flagship radio show, What Is Going On? And as an author, editor and 13 times book judge who's read thousands of books and interviewed hundreds of authors, I'm constantly asked what's really worth reading and what's not. So I created the No BS Spiritual Book Club to help you save time and money by picking the brains of discerning names who've walked this path before you. There's no catch, no fees and no BS. Just an ever-growing library of 10 best spiritual book lists from some of your favourite authors and teachers, plus free book excerpts, audios and video interviews with people like Don Miguel Ruiz Jr., David G., Lee Harris, Mark Nepo and more. From well-known classics to hidden gems you've never heard of, it's the only no BS guide to the best spiritual books to enlighten your journey of self-discovery. So why not join the club? Get inspired and save money at the nobsspiritualbookclub.com.
There are 16 million children struggling with hunger in America. That's 1 in 5 daughters, sons, neighbors, and classmates who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Yet billions of pounds of good food go to waste every year. It's time we do something about it. Feeding America is a nationwide network of food banks that helps provide meals to millions of kids and families in need. Visit feedingamerica.org to help them feed even more. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're feeding America.
Welcome back. Penny Kelly, I'm going to switch things around and we're going to talk about money first. That particular chapter makes very interesting reading. You say, today the fiat financial system is overloaded with debt and no longer sustainable. Every week there are new predictions of collapse. American debt is in the trillions. America is actually bankrupt. The banks began secretly crashing in 2018 and there is more. So keep going.
Yeah, the financial system is a big spiritual system, okay? I see the financial system, and I'll say this right off the top. It's the symbol of whether we believe in what is real or what is not real. And both of those are valid. So what is real is, here's a pencil. This is something you can put your hands on. You can feel it. If you have a dollar bill, that's a green paper with some printing on it. You can feel it. When you switch your belief system to something like a cryptocurrency or a digital currency, what are you really doing there? You're switching from believing in something that has to be material to something that doesn't have to be material. And that's a huge, huge step. When you make that step, that makes it possible for people to begin to move into other frequency zones, other dimensions of existence, and begin to get off the planet, begin to see other kinds of physics that are based on other things, that are based on what I'm going to call the interaction of frequencies that people trust. Right now it's all frequency, but some frequency is really slow and thick and dense, and that's the material aspect of it. When you cross a certain threshold, then you move into being able to operate in a world of energy. And that means that if we make that move into digital currencies, and they do have to be honorable, okay, then we make the move into being able to get off the planet. So
interesting, isn't it, that you said they have to be honorable. People think the bank is honorable. And then we find out that Wells Fargo and all, that debacle and so many more, and all of the things that we don't get to hear about. So,
Yeah, we don't. And your comment about the banks crashing in 2018, secretly crashing. Back in 2018, what became clear was that all the banks were like bankrupt. They didn't have enough cash, and so they would go to the Fed repo window and they would get whatever cash they needed. And all of a sudden, the Fed was handing out billions and billions of dollars every night to banks who had to keep a certain amount of cash on hand in order to keep up with all their transactions. And nobody understands the system or how it works. I don't understand the whole thing, that's for sure. But I understand enough about it to know that, wow, this isn't working. And that's that continuation of let's just print more money and make sure everything stays afloat until we decide that, oh, we're not going to do that anymore. And the whole thing is going to come down. And that's when they will try to introduce their central bank digital currencies. However, the issue with that is you have to have good, honest people at the helm, or it's the same with technology. You cannot go with it if you don't have good people who are managing it.
Absolutely, yeah. Talking about technology, you say that one legacy of technology that we have yet to address can be summed up in the simple question: why does so much of our technology have negative effects on the body-mind system?
Yes.
Good question. What's the answer?
Oh, wow. I think we just, in our ignorance of what is the true nature of reality? That's actually the next book I'm working on, The Nature of Reality. The nature of reality is it's all frequency, okay? And depending on how or what the arrangement or collection or assortment of frequencies are that are, making something happen, making something real, that frequency or those frequencies, when you change those, you get a different outcome. Why does hair grow on your head and toenails grow on your toe? It's because the frequencies in that sector of your energy system are the frequencies that make toenails, and the frequency up here on the head makes hair.
Mm-hmm.
It's all frequency. And so we have not understood what the frequencies are, that we are made of frequency. And so why do we just happen to pick a frequency, 60 cycles per second, that is so destructive? And then we doubled down on that and made it 120. That's our common, in the US, that's our common frequency. When you plug anything in, you get that frequency and its electromagnetic fields, and those are destructive. They're destructive to the cell function. So, there's so many other things that we do. We put this substance in our window glass, and it filters out UV light, some UV light. It lets in the bad and keeps out the good. It's like, oh, we've got that backwards. Why are we doing that? Why? There's so many things. When you've been in the world of engineering, you fall in love with how and why things work, and you use the knowledge that's out there. Physicists do the research. Here's the forces. You engineers figure out what to do with these, how to apply these, what can you do with these. And so we were very, back in the day of Edison and Tesla, we were very much not in alignment with good people. And so Tesla's stuff went out the window and Edison's stuff came in. It happened to be that Edison's discoveries were very, very destructive to the human body. And we've managed to get by since then. We haven't degenerated completely, but we're going down. And it's really sad to see that. And the financial system is one of the big symbols of that. The financial system is also a symbol of our trust in one another. And right now, there's not much of that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, let's start looking at, some of the solutions. I want to read something that you wrote in the book.
okay.
42 years ago, I experienced a full spontaneous awakening of Kundalini. Although I'd never heard of Kundalini and it took many years to figure out what had happened, it is now clear that the human energy system is a matrix of frequencies that occupies a very small local region in space. This set of energies works together to produce and maintain the body and its functions. What has so far not been recognised is that there are built-in thresholds of energy that, if reached, either intentionally or accidentally, will trigger a spontaneous reorganisation in the frequency matrix of the individual. Tell us why that's so important. What is that reorganisation?
That is a reorganization of all of your frequencies. Frequencies are consciousness. Every cell, every molecule, every frequency that makes up the body is consciousness. And the kind of consciousness you have depends on the kinds and on the organization of the frequencies that make up your system. So we are designed to evolve, and to evolve into much higher states of existence, much wiser, much more expansive consciousness, much more power. And we're just like, I'll use an acorn. It's the simplest thing. You put an acorn in the ground, you give it some water, it swells. Okay. And then, it puts out this little root that goes down to say, okay, what's out there? What can I draw from? In the human, that's the spine. And so we have this amazing built-in capacity to expand and to become much more than we think we can. And there are thresholds that will trigger that reorganization. Every system, every human, every plant, every animal is looking for more energy so that they can reach higher states of consciousness, bigger, more expansive states. When those are triggered, there's this sudden chaos in the system, confusion. You have access to old information and the new often doesn't fit. And so there's a reorganization that goes on. And what you end up with is an individual in the human who has an understanding, a much different understanding of the old system, and then also a new understanding of a whole, I'm going to say, a higher order of information and how things work in terms of energetics. And that reorganization changes that's a reorganization of your own frequencies. You then align with that higher order of organization, and you have more skills. You have things like telepathy, you have clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairsentience. Even in the lower states of consciousness, you still have this, I have this feeling. I have this, I can't get rid of this idea. It keeps popping in. And so that's us. We are designed to evolve. We are designed to open up, to become much more higher dimensional beings. Third dimensional thinking, on my website, I have a whole chart. It's like 4 pages. It says, it's a chart. Third dimension. This is how third dimensional people think and see the world. Fourth dimensional people, this is how they think and see the world. Fifth dimensional people, because I've been in all 3 dimensions and even the 6th, and even the 2nd. So we're designed to be able to be trans-dimensional, but here right now we're just so focused on this really narrow focus that we don't look outside at all, and we are missing our opportunity to evolve. And part of that evolution has to be the understanding that we literally, and when you see this actually work at the molecular level, what you see is all the molecules move apart just a little bit, which allows for greater flow of other energies through the system. But the ones that have moved apart still stay in tremendously close communication. And they become much more powerful. It's really amazing to watch
Having an understanding of the mechanics of that, I think, is very helpful to people because,
Yeah.
we're always being told, lift your consciousness, raise it higher. And people say, yeah, I'm willing, but how do I do that? But, once we understand
Right.
what you've laid out there, then we can look at, okay, so now how can I participate in this process and intentionally trigger that mechanism?
There's, in terms of the, you do not want to trigger a full spontaneous Kundalini.
No, sure.
That's too rough. It's too dangerous. I survived, but I recommend slow. and it comes down to, if I want to make it really, really simple, it comes down to being willing to shift your attention. Period. That's it. Shift it. And most people have what I'll call perceptual ruts, and they stay in those ruts again and again. And I have a little meditation I'm just about to put out on YouTube and my Patreon, in which I say to people, okay, let's just practice shifting your attention, put it on your right foot. And most people are like, where's that expanding consciousness? It isn't the expansion that we're after at first. You're after the willingness to shift perception somewhere else, even to something that you don't really understand why perception needs to go there. And then, you just get in the habit of being willing to look at other things and not just look, because you can't look without feeling. And you can't hear without feeling. So you have to look or see, feel. You have to hear, feel. And most people shut off their feeling. The result is a body that dies. So can we be immortal? We can. We're not there yet, obviously. But that whole ability to shift consciousness and then keep shifting it a little further, a little further, a little further, a little more, little, someplace else unusual, someplace you don't think you can perceive. In this little meditation, I tell people, okay, let's go to May 7th, 2024, and then let's go to June 21st, 2024. And so most people will have the reaction of, oh, I can't do that. Yes, you can. You can, and practice begins to expand. That's the goal. It's not raise your consciousness, it's expand it to encompass all of the other dimensions and other information that is here. And so once you get in that habit, once you begin to see other things, that changes you. It changes every place you put your attention, changes the organization of your frequencies.
Yes, yeah.
So,
And that's why you have all of those questions after every single chapter to
yes,
help people understand who they are, why they think the way they do,
yeah,
what belief systems they hold that
yeah,
they've never really questioned. It's extensive number of questions, but
yeah.
it's actually very, very thought-provoking.
It is. It
Mm,
is. And people have said, oh my God, I only got through the first 4 questions and I'm in crisis mode. And
yeah.
there's hundreds. There's like 50, 60, 80, 100, 120 questions after each little chapter. Questions about your personal self, questions about education, questions about related to money or to medicine or technology or whatever. So,
Yeah. And you've got communities around the world that are using this book
yeah,
as discussions, group discussions. You've got a community in South Africa,
yeah,
the Council for World Ethics.
yeah,
You've got several people. I mean, this is a perfect thing for people to gather together and
right.
start really looking at their thinking,
Yeah.
challenging.
I wanted it to be for any individual or any family or any group or any church or any, system, any community, somebody who's interested in, okay, what do we have to do to rebuild the world? What do we have to do to get out of the mess that we are currently in? If you're trying to fix the situation and you have the same old consciousness, you're going to create the same old messes. It's not going to work.
Yeah. There is a question I want to ask you about water, because this was raised
Mhm.
by a friend of mine. And you say in the book about, we have forgotten, that water is the most basic form of medicine.
Oh,
And my friend said that dehydration and dead water has been the real pandemic and has blocked us from elevating consciousness.
oh,
What's your response to that?
absolutely. Absolutely. Dehydration, aging it's drying out. It's
Mm.
turning into an old sponge. I get excited. I got to calm myself. So, yeah, when you don't drink and when you only drink dead water, then you are destroying your base system. It's water that holds us together. Water is intelligent. Water is conscious. Water wants to build itself up into a more intelligent, more capable, more powerful system. And that is not understood by the huge majority of people out there. And when you drink water that has died, and when we talk about water, dead water versus living water, what we're actually talking about is water whose molecules in living water are spinning in a left-hand direction. That is magnetic, it is form building, and if it is spinning in a right-hand direction, that is expulsive and it is form destroying. Water has to be kept moving, has to be kept cool, not cold, not frigid, but cool. And it has to be allowed to move constantly or it stops. It becomes dead. It dies.
So how would
So
we know? How would we know that we're drinking dead water?
anything that comes out of it, well, let me say one more thing, okay, in order to answer that question. Water that you pump out of the ground that has not risen to the surface on its own or come down through the hydrological cycle is dead water. Water that water that's pumped up is dead. So water that rises by itself is living, and water that comes through the rain is living. So it's been allowed to move through the whole cycle. In my, I think it's in Getting Well Naturally, I talk about that cycle and the incredible power of water, and the need for living water. So there are a couple people, Walter Schauberger, there's another fellow who had another system. You put it under your sink, it brings water in, and it circulates that water within this little oval chamber. It has to be an oval chamber, which is a 1 to 1.6 ratio in terms of its dimensions, and that returns it to living water.
What
So
about, I mean, there are so many people who are selling structured water or water that has this component or water that's been changed in some way. And a lot of it is multi-level marketing and people
yeah,
don't trust it.
I know. Structured water is actually pretty good. It's certainly better than dead water. Way, way, way better. There's a lot of people. Now, this is one of the things that we did in the lab. People sent water samples to us that they had created. Oh, this is the latest, greatest thing. This is healing water. This is blah, 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 whatever they termed it, whatever their marketing thing was. And we tested it as to whether it had any sort of energy and consciousness, whether it was living water or dead water, how much CDP, which is charge density plasma, it had in it. Some of them were absolutely, they were destructive. They were the exact opposite of what the marketing was.
Yeah.
And we wrote back and said, we don't know what you did to this, but this is not healing at all. This is going to destroy.
Yeah.
And worse than just plain old tap water. So I was like, okay, be careful. There are a couple people, Grander Water is a fellow who has created something for in your kitchen. Schauberger is another one who has created something for your water system so you can get access to living water. I think water is one of the problems. We hear all the time that we're running out of water. No, we're not. We're not even close to running out of water. Not even close. That is the same story as the poverty consciousness that has been fed to everybody from at least the last 40, 50 years. We're not running out of oil. We're not running out of water. And the planet actually makes more water. There's probably more water inside the planet than there is outside. And water comes in from the atmosphere all the time. So the problem is we have ruined what water we do have.
Yeah, we have to leave it here. We're almost out of time. Is there one thing you would like people, if there's one thing you'd like them to take away from this conversation, what would it be? But very quickly.
It would be to watch yourself, learn yourself, understand yourself. There's much more to you than you think.
Yeah. Penny Kelly, The Revival is not a comfortable read by any means, but it is a profoundly gripping and enlightening one. So thank you for writing it. Thank you for joining us today.
Glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
The Revival, Path to a New Earth, New Human by Penny Kelly is published by Lily Hill Publishing. For more information about Penny Kelly's books, videos, courses, online classes and events, visit her website at pennykelly.com. That brings us to the end of this week's show. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, and I'll be back at the same time next week with another edition of What is Going On. Till then, it's goodbye from me, and thank you again to Penny Kelly.
Thank you, everyone.